Welcome to this explainer. Okay, picture the world's most famous ancient sites. You're probably visualizing those soaring Maya temples, grand catacombs, or maybe the sprawling Egyptian tombs, right? But what if I told you that beneath these incredibly well-documented, world-renowned monuments, there are secret, redacted basement levels? We're talking about subterranean spaces that archaeologists actually found, were completely baffled by, and then immediately sealed away from the public.
So let's dive right into this because I really want you to think about this chilling question for a second. An ancient king who meticulously recorded absolutely everything about his reign left exactly one subterranean chamber completely unnamed and blank, just totally empty. Why? What could possibly compel an absolute ruler to command silence? We're going to look at the evidence today because, as you'll see, what we're looking at here is definitely not an isolated incident.
This actually points to what we call the pattern of concealment. It's this wild global phenomenon where researchers discover inexplicable archaeological anomalies, and it is almost always followed by immediate, systemic, institutional silence. It's like a giant puzzle. So instead of moving chronologically today, we're going to group 8 deeply unsettling sites by their themes to uncover how this deeply entrenched global pattern actually operates.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Mysteries Beneath the Americas. You know, the Americas hold some of the most heavily trafficked tourist sites on Earth, but just beneath the surface, they harbor incredibly restricted secrets. Back in 1909, an archaeologist named William Niven was excavating beneath the sacred ruins of Mitla in Mexico. He fully expected to find your standard Zapotec burial cache, but instead, what he actually stumbled upon was a massive anomaly, an older substructure. It predated the Zapotec civilization by thousands of years, featured a precise solstice alignment requiring crazy advanced astronomy, and most shockingly, contained skeletal remains with a huge cranial vault that he just couldn't explain. Niven was so disturbed he didn't even publish it in his formal reports, and the Mexican government quickly restricted all access.
And you know, the exact same thing happened just a few decades later. In 1952, Alberto Ruz Lulier excavated the tomb of the great Maya king Pakal at Palenque. Now, the classic Maya followed incredibly rigid burial protocols. I mean, every single object and body had a specific cosmological purpose. But Ruz Lulier found secondary skeletal remains near the sarcophagus that shockingly deviated from these strict rules. They weren't positioned as sacrifices or guards. They literally violated all known ritual patterns of the Maya.
When you look at the administrative aftermath across these sites, a really sketchy recurring motif of missing data emerges. At Mitla, Niven's notes on those anomalous skeletons remain entirely unpublished. Over at Palenque, the osteological reports on those secondary skeletons have never been released to the public. And then there's Lolton-Cave. In 1888, the American explorer Henry Mercer explored its deepest depths. But today, the pages of his private field journal covering that specific day feature a clean, professional, physical redaction. Someone, somewhere, decided his notes should absolutely never be read.
Now, why on earth would someone censor a cave exploration? Well, before Mercer even went down there, his local Maya guides stopped and flat out refused to go any further. They warned him with a very specific, eerie phrase. Some parts of the cave did not belong to people. The crucial takeaway here is that this wasn't folklore or just casual superstition. This was custodial knowledge passed down for 3,000 years. They were absolutely not speaking metaphorically about what inhabited the deepest, darkest parts of Lolton.
And hey, this bizarre phenomenon isn't just limited to ancient ruins. Fast forward to 1943, laborers repairing the floor of a Catholic basilica in Lima, Peru, accidentally broke through the stone and fell into an entirely unrecorded sub-network of catacombs. Normally, Catholic bone arrangement is memorial, right? But these bones were arranged in precise, concentric radial geometries, the kind of thing requiring intense mathematical planning. But here is the most terrifying detail. The workers found a subchamber within this network, and it was sealed from the inside. Whatever arranged those bones with mathematical precision literally locked itself in. The government quickly routed all future tours away from this section, and missing pages now completely plague the official archives.
Moving on, let's explore Section 2, Secrets of Ancient Empires.
When dealing with absolute rulers who obsessively documented absolutely everything, silence basically becomes a character itself. In 1817, Giovanni Belzoni explored the tomb of Pharaoh Seti I in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. The contrast here is just staggering. The upper walls are meticulously inscribed. Literally every square inch is covered in complex theology and underworld maps. A chamber without an inscription in a New Kingdom tomb is a theological impossibility.
Yet the deepest subchamber at the end of a 137-meter corridor was met with absolute blank silence. No inscriptions at all. Belzoni called whatever was inside inexplicable in a private letter. And today, that lower passage is permanently sealed with modern concrete.
We actually see the exact same pattern of deliberate royal omission over in Sri Lanka at the Lion's Rock fortress of Sigiriya. Back in the 5th century, King Kashyapa built a massive sky fortress on a volcanic monolith. But excavations in the 1970s breached a sealed interior level that completely predated the king's construction. Inside were anomalous skeletal remains and geometrically symmetrical objects made of unfathomable metallurgy that matched absolutely nothing in the South Asian archaeological record.
So that brings us to a glaring historical question. Why? Why did a king who built a massive, impregnable sky fortress feel the need to seal something directly beneath his throne, and then never write its name in the great chronicle of his reign? Kashyapa built over it, contained it, and erased it from history. Just like Pharaoh Seti I, he chose deliberate, deafening silence over documentation.
Which brings us to Section 3, Rewriting the Prehistoric Record.
This willful erasure, yeah, it happens in deep prehistory too, where the implications become downright biological. Let's walk through how this unfolded. In 1956, Henri Lott led an expedition to map the incredible prehistoric rock art of Tassili Nagier in Algeria. But in 1958, his team reached an upper cliff face that caused Lott to immediately suspend their work. Private letters from his team later revealed they found figures painted 4 to 5 meters tall that were absolutely not recognizably human in posture or proportion. The Algerian government restricted access shortly after independence in the 1960s, and today, that specific cliff face has been entirely wiped from UNESCO maps.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the context of Saharan rock art. The artists who painted these cliffs for 15 millennia consistently depicted humans and animals at proportional scales that reflected absolute reality. So the crucial point here is that the massive scale of these particular entities wasn't just a stylistic convention. It was a measurement. The terrifying implication is that these towering, non-human figures were painted exactly as they were seen by our prehistoric ancestors.
Okay, before we hit our final and honestly most profound sight, we need a super quick grounding in some hard science. A stratigraphic sequence refers to sedimentary layers that act as a chronological record. Simply put, the deeper you dig, the older the geological time you're looking at. It's a highly reliable way to read the history of the Earth and the creatures that lived on it.
So let's apply that exact science to Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. The progression here is super telling. Excavations began way back in 1940. Fast forward to 2012, and archaeologists made a completely groundbreaking discovery in Stratum 10, hard evidence of controlled fire dating back 1 million years. It fundamentally changed human history. But just 1 year later, in 2013, the government permanently sealed the deepest stratum, the layer immediately beneath that million-year-old fire.
Right? Why on earth would they permanently seal the greatest archaeological site in Africa? Well, according to informally circulated accounts from the researchers who were actually down there, the deepest level contained purposeful mining marks cut right into the hard dolomite. But the grip geometry required to make those marks falls completely outside the hand anatomy of any known hominin. Even worse, they found skeletal material that physical anthropologists couldn't place into any biological category on Earth. And remember, all of this was located deep below the 1 million-year-old fire line.
All right, let's tie it all together in Section 4, the architecture of concealment.
When you actually lay out the official institutional excuses side by side, a very cohesive pattern of bureaucratic blockades emerges. At Lolton Cave, the Mexican government claimed structural instability, but conveniently provided no engineering report. At KV-17 in Egypt, it was labeled a preservation intervention in a section tourists had never even visited. And at Wonderwork, it's supposedly a structural assessment pending for over a decade now. If there's one thing governments globally excel at, it's definitely using a permanent pending status to enforce silence.
Which brings us right back to the sheer mind-boggling geological age of the Wonderwork anomaly. The stratigraphy is merciless here. As one researcher noted regarding the anomalous remains in that sealed layer, something lived in the dark below the oldest fire we have ever found. Let that sink in for a second. Whatever was down there wasn't just non-human. It predates the mastery of fire. It predates our entire evolutionary understanding of technologically sophisticated life on Earth.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. We've seen ancient kings, colonial explorers, and modern governments all arrive at the exact same conclusion. Some things are just better left sealed. But if the most famous ancient sites on Earth have redacted basement levels, what exactly are we walking on top of? Thanks so much for joining me today. Until next time, keep questioning the historical record and always keep looking beneath the surface.